And welcome to I Protest. This is Donald Jeffries coming to you from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., as we do every Friday at this time, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern. You didn't hear any introduction music because I'm kind of on my own. Billy's producing it off-site, so I don't have any intro music today. So anyhow, we're having a return guest. She's one of my favorites, and I think she's a fan favorite too. Megan Walsh. You all know her, daughter of John Walsh of America's Most Wanted fame, who is become just a great talk show guest. I'm telling you, she's full of fascinating information, and she's got a lot of knowledge and has gone through quite a bit. So Megan, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Don. And thank you to everyone who's joining today. It's good to be back.
Oh, great. That's wonderful. Yeah, it is good. And so we just have audio today. Sometimes we get the video, Megan. Sometimes we don't. So we take what we can get. So how have you been since we talked to you last? I guess we probably haven't talked to you since the election. So what's new with you? What are your impressions?
Yeah, it has been a minute. And yeah, sorry, guys, I've been behind schedule today. We're working hard. I've got some announcements that we'll share and some stuff coming up that we can talk about that's really exciting. And yeah, I guess it has been since before the election, huh, Don? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, well, we got Trump in, right? We're happy
Hmm.
that Trump's in, and we're seeing a lot of progress. And obviously the stuff with the border and immigration, we're seeing a lot that we can probably discuss a little bit back and forth. But the audits and the U.S.
Hmm.
All that kind of stuff, the audits and all of the ending of the federal funding, different things that we're seeing that I'm kind of, to be honest, at this point with everyone in the audience, I'm kind of watching right now. If anyone that knows me knows I kind of like to be an observer. We know that, the high percentage of media reports that are inaccurate when they first come out, Don, don't we?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I like to kind of be the observer and kind of see where things are going. I like to ask questions and see, anyone that's on my X page, knows that I love to ask questions and see what other people bring forward. I love when people do that and we can kind of converse about things as well, especially with obviously the kids issue, the children's issue. That being very bipartisan or nonpartisan, even if you will, and to be able to discuss that and kind of bring forth what people are finding and what's going on, whether it's from the past, like we always like to talk about, or historically, whether it's something current or whether it's something that's being proposed. So we're seeing legislation being proposed that's really great. I guess I could talk a little bit about that for a second. We've got
Sure.
Leah Cushman. She's in New Hampshire, and she is proposing some legislation up there. She's on X. She used to be a rep, and she started speaking up about family court and CPS, and they literally pushed her out. We watched the whole thing happen. So she is a wonderful mother and young lady, and she decided to dedicate herself towards some legislation that I actually was just sent over. She texted me this morning. And I'll be looking at. So she is again on X, Leah Cushman. And so you can follow her over there, as well as Gabe Woolley, Woolley. He is actually doing some great, gosh, I think it's Oklahoma. He's doing some great legislation to hold social workers accountable and various things aligned with that, in terms of felonies and consequences, right? Like we always talk about, we've got this lack of accountability and transparency that we're trying to, to strengthen and change, at least while we still have to deal with this system taking our children, right? So
Hmm.
they're doing a great job there. He is also on X, again, Gabe Woolley. He just did some great interviews. You can find videos of him on there and see what you think. But I highly suggest going over and checking them out. Support if you can. And, it's great to see people doing things in other states that, if it's successful or, something that we deem as good, that we can try to emulate in our other states and things if it's successful in its intent. So those were, two very encouraging things that have come out. We, Trump did the executive order addressing familial trafficking. That was a big deal. I'm kind of
Oh,
thinking.
describe that one. What exactly did that one say?
Well, again, I'm working on projects, so I will be delving further into each of these as kind of we go on. And I guess it might be a good segue to kind of, announce what I'm working on. I will be starting
Yes.
my own podcast in a couple of weeks. It will be I have a new locals channel that we're setting up so that everyone can be in one place. I know a lot of people, I'm solely on X. As everyone knows, I've stuck to X. I've done everything there and made it simple. And things are just expanding. People are wanting more from me, more resources, more information, things like that. And we want to be able to provide more for the people now that we've been through all of this and had the time. So I am taking things over to locals.com. I will have a website and a community. Hopefully I will have everyone over there and it'll be a great community. I think that this is, Twitter has X has its place, and all of that. But I think to have a more intimate community and be able to get, more direct information to my supporters, I think is a really fun idea. So we're working on that as well as some merchandise. Everyone knows that I have a background in fashion and design and music. So it'll be some stuff to get people, what I'm looking at it as is more of conversation starters, right? Child trafficking, the things that we talk about, corruption. It's not easy to talk about. So if we can come up with some fun things and, that you can support and also be conversation starters within your community or your friend groups or things like that, why not, right? So
Yeah.
that's coming up. It's going to be called, or it is called, America's Most Corrupt. So it's
Now, where did you get that from?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I think it's a little more accurate, but
Yeah,
just
yeah.
my creative juices, Don. Let's keep the sarcasm heavy right now. No, I'm kidding. No, so America's Most Corrupt will be on locals.com. We'll be releasing the links and stuff for subscription and sign up hopefully this weekend and have our first podcast in about a week and a half to 2 weeks. So I'm really excited. I'm nervous. I'm going to need everyone's support and please spread the word about it as well. But, we're going to have a contact, a space for people to contact and, different issues of corruption and things once we cover, a good background of my situation, the National Center. And then again, I guess what we could go into, because I completely forgot your question that I went off on this whole thing on, Don. I apologize.
I kind of forgot it too.
Well, I'm sure the chat might be able to remind us, but I got excited about this, and I think that there's a lot going on that just a good review and laying things out, dealing with the child protection and safety grift in America, so that we talk about.
Well, I want to tell Robin Lee I guess in the X chat. Yes, I can see. For some reason I can't see comments from Facebook. I don't know why, but I can see comments a lot. We have a lot more from YouTube. And Robin, I think you're the only one commenting from X. I don't know why people don't comment over there, but I can see your chat. So if you have any questions or anything, just let us know. So has your situation? So nothing has changed about your personal situation. There are no updates since the last we talked.
It really has not, unfortunately, internally, right? I'll share with you guys that it has not. It's almost, I will also be honest, Don, it's almost been a little harder since Trump got in because of the frustration, right? I'm praying for grace every day. I know that like myself, many others got into this and support and behind him because of the child aspect and the child trafficking aspect. So, I have faith. I know it's God's timing, but it is hard every day. It's almost become more hard, now that he's in, because you're just waiting. But again, like, you asked me about the familial trafficking. So
yes, that was it.
yeah,
Yeah,
I was saying, so as I was saying about him, we are seeing, things come out that are very encouraging. Maybe not in the ways or the obvious ways that we would like, or maybe I'm more direct and, this obviously is much bigger than myself and my children. We all know that. We all know that I know that. It's how I show up every day. So to be able to see him do, we can go into this now, the EOs on familial trafficking, as well as the DOJ auditing of NGOs is huge. I did just post that up on my X today. I think people are really having a stroke over seeing the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's funding. It was on red alert, if you will, for NGOs, flagged, all of that. So the familial trafficking, it's very interesting because I think a lot of people don't understand, there's this big focus in the media, big messaging in the media, if you notice, that's always child sex trafficking. It's always child sex trafficking. There are so many other forms of child trafficking. I mean, we all know the obvious organ and, the other stuff that we're adoption that I talk about all the time, so on and so forth. But I think people don't understand a lot of the ways that they are trafficked that's outside of the system. So if we know that we have 88 to 92% approximately of child trafficking coming from the foster care system, that does leave that remainder percentage. And it's also not to say that it's not happening within the foster care system, and especially within family court, which is mostly where a lot of the CPS cases end up going. A lot of it is used, family court is used to start a lot of the CPS issues. They use that when people are getting divorced, encouraging arguments or going against the other parent, finding discrepancies or exaggerating to get custody, that then there's a space of vulnerability for CPS to come in and say, oh, maybe there's this issue, or instate a GAL under the guise of, representing the children and for their best interest. That's the biggest propaganda phrase that they put out, in the best interest of, it's not in anyone's interest at all, but the courts. So, just looking at things like that, but familial trafficking can happen, I hate to say, but I guess and the easiest example for me, very obviously, would be my father. Familial trafficking, whether you are using family court or CPS, for example, he used both, that then took it into CPS, and he trafficked, there's a lot that has to do with the connection to adoption fraud, right? A lot of grandparents will adopt the grandchildren to get the supplements. There's a lot of different ways that would be a whole show in itself to describe that. But I'm very happy that he is addressing it, that he did an EO about it. This would also include exploitation of children, like me being taken around everywhere as a child, for them to, cover whatever they were doing before, and to start the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, for example. Modeling or different ways that talent or children are used, child actors and things like that with parents and all that. So I'm hoping that that'll cover, a wide variety of those, and at the same time be able to allow the public to learn and understand, not just, keep victim blaming or shaming or thinking that this is some sensationalized conspiracy theory. Even if we looked at Adam's case, we could argue that possibly that could have been a familial trafficking situation.
Right. Do you see the question on the screen from White Wolf? Is Megan aware of any trafficking within the Catholic Church structures?
Yeah. I'm familiar, obviously, with the old school Catholic, with the boys' schools and with what was going on with children back in the day. I know a lot
Boys Town, yeah. Boys Town was tied to the Franklin credit scandal, yeah.
Oh, yeah, buddy. We love those, don't we? On here, we love those. So here they come up, and again, I think a lot of the other one we love is the Finders, and that's going to come up a lot when the National Center gets exposed. So, and that is, also showing the CIA roots and the things that we've talked about on here before. We actually did find, I guess I'm skipping off of that, Trump, we're waiting to see, right? We'll move on from that kind of a topic, but Trump, we're waiting to see. I'm not discouraged. I'm a little frustrated because it would take, one day to say CPS is our domestic child trafficking. We need to address this. But again, we're seeing, and the NGOs audited. I'm pushing big time, and if people want to have a voice or do anything in this, please push for CPS audits. I think once that's audited, people will absolutely, again, have a stroke or whatnot. I mean, we already have Title IV laid out. We already have all of the funding laid out for people. But I think now that more attention's on it, they might notice or kind of choke a little more once they see, how much actually goes to administration, operating costs versus the welfare and well-being of the foster children, and their placements and their safety. Okay, so the trafficking with churches and Catholic churches. So obviously that came up big time, and the current events brought people's attention to that through the border, right, and the NGOs and the unaccompanied minors, and all of that. So people looked at it. Also we have like TAN in our history that created, taking children from, lower income and selling them through adoption to, elites and the wealthy. So we've got that kind of a thing, all goes hand in hand. The Catholic Church is going to just be another example of the NGO. So NGO 501c3, it's hand in hand, government entities. That's the funding is going to incentivize your corruption and your honesty and your transparency and accountability. So with the churches, we're seeing this not only in Catholic churches, we're seeing it in the big mega churches and things like that. We see
certainly, yeah.
Yeah, the pastors and the big mega churches becoming 501c3s, and then creating programs like, homes for trafficked women, which is actually exploiting them more and benefiting and getting funding for that. There's a lot. That's a whole, again, another show, as well as foster programs and things, which then they get cuts of, and they have incentives, which when you're in small towns, it becomes, it's not what you know, it's who you know. A lot of creepy stuff starts going on. And then that also goes into private adoption agencies. So not even through the government, but the most trafficking through adoption and things happens through the private adoption agencies. So, the Catholic Church is very important to look at. I know it hits home for a lot of people. But again, it is one example of this playbook that the NGOs and these organizations, nonprofits, are all following for this grift.
Well, just from what we're seeing so far that's been released from about just opening up the USAID records to see the stuff that's been there, I would be surprised if something like the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, that seems like a natural fit in there that they got funding from them. I don't, have you checked that? I mean, I would be, not be surprised at all if they got some money from USAID.
Oh yeah, that's what I was just mentioning. I actually posted it for those that follow me. I posted it today on my page on X. It's Megan Walsh _. I'm pulling it up right now. I actually just posted also that I saw my father will be a keynote speaker on February 22nd for, let me pull it up, the Caldwell Institute for Public Safety. And that event will be at 6 p.m. at Mar-a-Lago. So my father, John Walsh, will be speaking at Mar-a-Lago. Ironic. I mean, you couldn't make it up, Don. You couldn't make it up.
So is he a Trump supporter?
You know what? He has always been, okay, so we can go into that for a second. He's always been registered independent. He's always said, I'm the only guy that can go up to anyone in the halls of Congress or on Capitol Hill and pin them against the wall and tell them to do what's right. I always thought he was conservative. I grew up being hosted by Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And, they were buddies back in the day. And then it seemed to hit a divide, my brother and my father, around Obama. I know that they both voted for Obama and started voting, liberal from there on out, if you will.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. So before.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to pull this up for people. I should have sent it to you before, but this is high taxpayer funds alert. So if you're looking, and for those of you that are looking at the USAID polls and what they've exposed so far or published so far in this, they have some of them in red, high taxpayer funds alert, right? And the National Center comes up with its EIN number. Its gross receipts are over $99 million. Their contributions are over $10 million, almost $11 million. The grants given visible are zero, and the taxpayer funds are almost $49 million. And so what is that $49 million actually doing? This is something that I've discussed, from the beginning when I saw $40 million on average of our taxpayer funds going to the National Center per year, as well as, approximately 18 to $20 million in private corporate donors. What is all of this going towards? If the National Center and the FBI are quoting this 88+% of child trafficking coming from the foster care system, what are they doing about it? Where was John Walsh for Epstein? Where is he? I thought he was the manhunter, hunter. Where's I thought he got the scumbags, all of that. So where are we? And there's so many questions to that, then like I've reviewed before, why are we getting missing children that listed on the missing site that are not missing? Why is there a mobile app that you can search the missing children, the current missing children? Like, what if I was
wait, hold on a second. You said there are missing children on the site that are not missing?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I also actually posted that this
I haven't
morning.
heard that one before. Wow. Okay, tell us a little bit about that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's one of the first and biggest issues that there have been, and different forms of it or different reasons. When I was during COVID and starting my advocacy, obviously local parents and parents offline were contacting me. There's several people that had come forward and said, my child is listed on the missing database, and they're not missing. We actually have a child right now, Leon Scarborough. He's on the missing listed as missing right now, and he's not missing at all. It's kind of similar to their use of Amber Alert in the wrong way, but Leon actually is with his father, and he was being trafficked through the CPS system, and his father, who is more of, I guess he's a national or more independent. He's got his own thing, and that's, that's their own, prerogative, I guess. But he took it upon himself to go get his son out of the foster home that he was, or the foster facility, I should say, in Palm Beach, speaking of Epstein, and out of our county, out of John Walsh's county. And they put out Amber Alerts for him the first 2 times. And then the third time, Tracy took him and fled, and they put him on the missing list when he wasn't missing. The context of the missing list is not a parent that has taken their child.
Why do they do that? Do you think that's just to deflect resources and waste people's time? I mean, why that's
higher statistics equals higher funding. We just talked about $40 million.
Okay. Yeah.
It's the same thing that's happening with the reporting on X or other platforms of the child sex abuse material. They are setting the algorithm so high and sensitive that, if you say bathtub, if you say bird, whatever, the report's getting sent over. And the issue there is that the National Center uses their connections or their status to violate search and seizure. Then they say, oh, well, we got this report. So I also, actually, it's ironic this is all coming up. I actually posted also this morning an example of that, an older case where a gentleman, they went onto his phone. Regardless, I don't know whether he actually had child porn or not on it, but, they did look into his device and did that without the proper protocol, without following the law and violating his right, involving search and seizure. So, we've seen a lot of that. But again, that's creating where you hear, Don, we get millions of reports of child sex abuse material every single day. There's just so much of it, right? That's that grift. Okay. When all of this is data collection at the end of the day, and when you are the authority and every platform is required to tell the masses to report back to you all of the videos or all of whatever you find having to do with child pornography, then what does that make you, Don? It makes you the largest resource for exactly that. So if we're thinking Epstein and we're thinking about, child trafficking rings or the dark web or trading and selling of child porn, I don't know if I already said blackmail, this would be a great tool to utilize. if you will, especially when we see people like Les Wexner donating to the center through, their companies like L Brands and things. So, I've mentioned that before, but it's interesting. Let's see what's the next. I was reading the comment below.
Yeah, you see, but Epstein is tied to tons of various legitimate businesses all over South Florida, but particularly in Palm Beach County. That's Chris Bucket.
Oh yeah, I mean it's the funnel out. It's the classic money laundering, and then again that not what you know, it's who you know. So but I could, what, actually, now that that's coming up, I should talk on something we'll be expanding more on America's Most Corrupt. But we have found some new history on John Walsh. Don, can you
Okay.
imagine?
Wow. Okay. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. So again, for those that aren't familiar, a lot of, that what got me into this, a big part of it was knowing my family, obviously knowing my parents, and knowing the media narrative that was put out my entire life, and that I believe, just like the majority of America, and the narrative that changed America in many ways in terms of parenting and how you raised your children, how you grew up as a child, things like that. So for me, I wanted to look at the reality of the situation without the media narrative, right? I wanted to look at the truth of it. I wanted to say who were Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas, aside from Adam Walsh narrative, who is John and Reve Walsh before the Adam Walsh narrative, because, they were put out as this grieving all-American working class, barely making it by kind of parents that were stoic and all of this, when I knew better. And my father's told the public better, in terms of him being in the hotel business and very well off and in the lifestyle within Hollywood, Florida, and the Bahamas, all leading up to and for quite a while prior to Adam's disappearance. And so what we have found actually is very interesting, and we found a pattern that follows it, and that is that before Adam went missing, there was actually legislation that was being passed around. And again, we'll expand and go into more detail and show proofs on America's Most Corrupt. But just to give a little tidbit here, we did find legislation that actually Joe Biden was on, a big part of it. And it was being shopped around prior to Adam disappearing. And they were having a hard time getting a sponsor, anyone to pick it up and sponsor it. And it was legislation that was very much along the lines of what was passed with the creation of the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, the Adam Walsh Act, and the things that we saw follow. So the point here is that was being shopped around. They were having a hard time getting it sponsored and therefore, put through or have any success with it. And so then we find out that all of a sudden Adam goes missing. Ernie Allen and them bring my parents in. And next thing we know, John Walsh is the face of this legislation, and it's getting passed. And then we're creating the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, which was the first conglomerate NGO organization, anything that covered the what I call the child protection and safety grift. So it really created the base there. Not saying that there weren't other efforts or other aspects of it, like we know with the historical issues, but this was the first time, in terms of funding, it established funding, it established lobbying and legislative rights, all of this for behind the scenes in a structure. So from there, we've noticed, if we look historically, a clear pattern of legislation that is trying to be passed or put through or sponsored and having trouble, right? Having difficulty. And then we see a national missing child or a child crime case happen. We have the parents come out in the media. They're, distraught, but they're stoic. They're not going to let it be in vain. Then we see a creation of a foundation, or an organization in their honor, which then therefore goes into a law or an act or something like that, off of the crime. We've seen it with the McCann Foundation, right? We've seen it with, Gabby Petito. We've seen it, so many, the different ones. If you watch the pattern, some kind of effort, or like even down to Dutro, and Belgium, and creating child focus and different things like that. So we see this playbook of legislation that's having trouble, some kind of national issue with a child that's chosen in a family, and then we see this NGO, and what we're finding is a huge enabler for child trafficking, money laundering, and hiding those that are involved in it, that can afford to do all of this and afford to buy children. Right? I can't afford to buy children. Don, can you?
Yeah, well, I've never looked into it, but I'm sure they're going for some. Yeah, that's just again, you get into that kind of really a sickening aspect of it. Twisted Episcopal, thanks for the kind words. He's talking about whether how close your father was to Trump, and I think didn't you say you were entertained at Mar-a-Lago yourself? So it sounds like they were pretty close.
Well, yeah, I think that, I wouldn't say we were like hanging out by the pool with him, but we were hosted, and it would be an affiliation. They knew each other in meetings and working together. Again, this was the 90s, late 90s, things like that. But yeah, we would go down for an event or something he was hosting, or I would go up and be in the kids' rooms upstairs and stuff like that. So it was on that level, but it wasn't like best friend. We weren't vacationing with each other or anything like that, I will say. I know there's an article, my dad from years ago, that says something about, Trump's a good guy, but he's one crazy bastard or something like that. So
Yeah, yeah.
who knows? I hope that they're not on the same team, because I know my father's police state, but, surveillance state. So we'll have to see what goes on with that.
Well,
I was
well,
never into politics before any of this. I do support whoever's, in office, because we want them to do the best or still
right.
push for what we need. And also the children, I will always talk about. And also, I think a lot of people don't realize that I do ask for help from people, but it's really so that others can see their responses, Don. It's really to
Hmm.
show people and weed it out. So I might not be as naive as I might appear sometimes, but I'm always going to give people an
No,
opportunity to,
well, yeah,
step
you're
up.
we're very similar in that regard. I get that all the time because people tell me, I've been talking about RFK Jr. and the alt media is so black pilled. They hate everybody. They don't trust anybody, and I understand that
Mhm.
because you look and scratch these connections and you find out, okay, yeah, I mean, I don't like Trump having, RFK Jr. having Rabbi Shmuley following him around. I don't like that, but he's saying some good stuff, and I'm still a bit of a Kennedy fanboy, so I get it for that, and you're hopeful, and obviously from somebody like your situation, if it's hard to see what's really being done, but there's a lot of smoke right now with what Trump appears to be doing.
Yeah.
Just pardoning the January 6 people, I think was great, and I've had several of them on my show already, and again, but opening up this USAID, and that's the first thing. Imagine what's in the Federal Reserve if they ever audit that. Now they're talking. He supposedly told Musk to audit the Pentagon, and you talk about because you talk
Oh
about
my
the
goodness.
intelligence agencies that don't have a. We don't know what their budgets are. They've been secret forever, so can't imagine what stuff. So that's
Well,
great just in terms of
I think, what
disclosure.
was it about the CIA the other day? The employees were offered that they could leave, or some
Yeah,
nonsense.
yeah, yeah.
CIA. So I was a little, there was a little pep in my step seeing that. But again, what I've grown up in, and especially the reality of it behind the scenes, I'm not gonna, I'm going to again encourage something to be good, or if I see something, I'm going to encourage it. I'm also going to be looking at it behind the scenes. I'm always going to hope for the best, but I'm also not going to be, attached to anything. If I've had to come out about my own father, it's not going to be hard for me to
Right.
understand anyone else being involved or not what they say they are. And we know that they're politicians. Again, I want, this is nothing against Trump or pro Trump or anything. I'm neutral in it. We have a person in a position that is leading our country. We have issues that need to be addressed. I think that it's very encouraging that a lot of this is being addressed, and we need to stay in a positive space. We can choose to be paranoid, we can choose to be negative, or we can be positive and say we're going to hope for the best, but we're not going to, have the wool pulled over our eyes. And I'm
Right.
not perfect either. That's why I have a community. That's why I look at what people say and I interact with my supporters, and they're not even supporters. It's my colleagues over there. And we all, kind of, talk together, and there's great stuff that people send to me that I have no idea about. So I think that it's important, again, just to remember that we are not to idolize anyone. God is in control of this, and Trump hopefully will stay aligned to that. I know the thing that keeps me positive in it is how many eyes he has on him, right? If he doesn't do
Mm-hmm.
what's right, he'll be the one that won't be able to walk down the street. So there is always
Mm-hmm.
that. But again, I'm supportive. I hope that we can get something done. I hope that CPS can be audited and addressed. At this point, all 50 states are guilty of federal kidnapping and trafficking, which by law would call for the immediate halt of all funding and operations, which we did see him halt federal grants, which is another great thing. Maybe it's, again, not as obvious, but these are things that add up and we'll be exposing more and more as we go along. So I'm going to stay in the positive, but I still, on my X, people will see I'm not afraid to question something or say, hey, I'm not digging where this is, the direction this
Mm-hmm.
is going, or I'm worried about what I'm seeing with Trump or this person or that person, I would hope that we can all start doing that. I think it's a very healthy way to look at things and also remain independent and be able to navigate, life and the craziness, especially what we've seen over the last 4 years continuing. So why not work that muscle, right? Um,
Yeah, and I think we're seeing, a lot of people like you're talking about, the American empire is collapsing and all that, but then you get, mixed signals about taking over Greenland and all that stuff. But domestically, it looks like things are, because things are being exposed. Whether it comes to anything, I don't know. Just this USAID stuff, I think it's making the Democrats' heads explode, and the average American citizen is looking, is like saying, "Whoa!" Because, for instance, they came up with, I forget how many millions, 46 million or something, George Soros was given. So you people, everybody that hates Soros and talks about him, financing all these nefarious things, thought he was using his own money. But
right.
because he has plenty of it, apparently we were paying him to undermine America. So who knows how many other examples there are like that. So I think this is great, and that alone, at least it's interesting. I mean, usually we can't say anything positive about anything that's going on in any administration. So at this point, I'm giving Trump cautious credit, because he's doing something. Now we'll see where it leads, but and I think you probably feel the same way.
It's up to the people to keep pressure on anybody. We have to keep that accountability on what you have promised and what you have said you're going to do, even down to that. So it's very fundamental. I think a reason why I haven't, I'm not, as known as other people are, is because, unfortunately, I'm sorry guys, I don't like to sensationalize stuff. I like to deliver and look at things and talk about things in a grounded sense, so we can actually feel some kind of accomplishment. We can see things differently, or we can create change, so on and so forth. So, it's just, and like you're saying, those oligarchs and things like that, the funding behind the funding and everything, that's part of what I had posted today with the tax funding. There is a chart there to show the breakdown, actually, to the National Center for those that are interested. As well as, again, something that we will be showing and that we've found recently, that we'll be having on the podcast, is we have found the oligarch behind John Walsh. Just like you were saying, everyone would assume Rupert Murdoch, right, or something
Hmm.
affiliated with Fox and all of that. But lo and behold, we have found a much larger oligarch that is over that. We will be revealing that on America's Most Corrupt. And I think people will be very interested to see who that is. I know everyone knows about Iran Contra, and we've talked about that, but I don't think many are familiar with, the Lebanon Contra and the things that happened in Lebanon and with the Lebanese.
Are you going to make America's Most Corrupt? Is that going to be a podcast too? Because that's great. That would be a
That is
great
the
title for it.
podcast. Yeah, that is the
Oh, so
podcast.
it is. Okay,
Yep.
okay, guys.
Channel is on locals. You'll be able to find me there, and the podcast will be America's Most Corrupt with
What
Megan
what is
Walsh.
what is locals? It's locals.com, and who's on there? I haven't heard of that. What exactly is it?
Yeah, there's a lot of other podcasters, like Redacted is on there.
Oh, okay, okay.
Some others. I was looking this morning, even when I was, doing some of my research. But yeah, there's a lot of, other people. It's great because, unlike Patreon, where you have to like be a subscriber, you have to pay. Locals has where you can see for free and everything. You can go on, see what I'm posting, see see the community interacting. So, a lot of things I will be providing for free, but then there is tiers to support and obviously get more content. So we'll be adding more podcasts. Everyone that knows me knows I love to do workshops or give people takeaways and things that, for actionable stuff or things that really help people after the fact or to get involved, so on and so forth. So I think and also for them to be able to contact me and possibly have us review some aspect of corruption, that is brought forward or to our attention behind the scenes. There's availability for that for us to cover. So I'm looking forward to that. And again, I'll be releasing the page on my X this coming week, if not sooner this weekend. So it'll be really great. And it's also a way for me to provide for myself between everything that they've done. They keep everything moving. And, once you establish something, they've got their infiltration and to keep you unstable. So I'm really happy that this can be something independent, something of my own. I've spent 4 years going on everyone else's podcasts and really spreading the awareness and the word. And I think that this will be a nice kind of one-stop shop for everyone to stay connected and interact, and for me to be able to put out information. Not just about my stuff, but, about our general issues of corruption, other people's. I know, everyone's got small towns and small issues and, a lot of police corruption going on, for example, and, things like that. So we'll be getting that involved. I also wanted to say something real quick before we move on. Someone had said in the chat, John Walsh did great work, but looking back, he definitely helped the Mockingbird machine, especially right before 9/11. He did many specials on bin Laden. Yeah, he actually was the only media allowed on the scene, on ground zero, for 9/11 to do the quote unquote cover story. That should have a whole different meaning nowadays for people, but I digress. Yes, he's part of the Bush, as I call it, the Bush crime family, the Bush crime machine. He is a good puppet for it. He always has been. And, another point that I think people don't understand that we've started to realize with the National Center and exactly this point, look, it looked good, but he was definitely doing things for others in the Mockingbird machine. For example, here he is with the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, which, like I went through a few moments ago, was that first establishing organization. Well, they're going around with their corporate partners, their corporate sponsors, their data guys, all of this, putting out great media, the Mockingbird media, putting out America's Most Wanted, putting out the propaganda of galas and missing kids and all this kind of stuff. Well, behind the scenes, because of those lobbying rights, because of that funding, all of it, they were all establishing things like Title IV, which is the adoption incentive, ASFA, the American Safe Families Act, which shortened the period of time for families to get their children back, and incentivized adoptions under Clinton, created, allowed for the creation of the Clinton Foundation or Thorn or Child Focus or the International Center for Missing Exploited Children, and all of these things that are the actual child trafficking. So we're not saying that child trafficking that we're seeing it, or children being taken off the street, stranger danger, all of that was being put out. And you have the campaigns and the sign up your child and learn this course of safety and all of that. But behind the scenes, they're establishing what is our actual domestic child trafficking in America, the CPS, the family courts, all of the monetization of our hardships, right? In such a sacred space. So I think people don't really, I didn't think of that. It was probably a revelation about a year ago going through all of this. Like, wow, they really were doing what they were supposed to. They were out getting the corporations, getting the money, getting the public, the propaganda out, and it takes a village and the best interest, stranger danger, all these CIA, kind of psychological stuff, getting people to do that. And it worked. I mean, who can deny that, how we were raised and how we grew up was changed after Adam Walsh. So,
Absolutely. You see, there's a question from Twisted Pistol on there. I guess Twisted Pistol probably didn't see the other shows I've had with you, because he's asking if you have good relations with your kids or your pop's poison perception. So, you want to explain? Obviously, your kids were taken from you, and your father was involved in that. Can you quickly, for him, and maybe somebody else didn't miss it, uh, tell a little bit about that, just so it explains what your personal motivation is here.
Yeah, of course. I have wonderful relationships with my kids. I have not been able to, I've been not allowed to see them. And more importantly, they've been denied to see their own mother for the past 4 years. Obviously, my baby's younger, so half of that time for her. But I do have I have beautiful relationships with my children. Before and while all of this was going on, they know the truth. They were trying to speak up to the workers. They were trying to speak up to anyone. I'm so proud of my oldest daughter. I could almost start crying, so I won't keep going on that. But I was just so proud of her, how courageous and graceful and everything she was. My children were wonderful through this. I tried to make it as normal and as positive as I mean, that's crazy to say, right? But as I could. I held my grace and I just kept speaking the truth. Of course, CPS, they like to say that, the parents aren't taking responsibility for their actions. That's what they say when you go in and advocate for your children, or if you speak up that there was no abuse and they've actually put you with, your abusers, or they've put the children with the abusers. They don't want to hear that. That's how the system's working. But again, we've gone over that before, and that's for another time. My parents do have my children, the baby, my beautiful baby Esther Grace was adopted and sold to the state in front of me by my father in a side courtroom deal with the Indian River County, judge and DCF, the state of Florida. Governor DeSantis is well aware of this and has ignored all of it, as well as AG Ashley Moody, while they do projects like, Crime Stoppers and the reopening of the National Center building in Epstein's Palm Beach, at the same time with my father. So it's very twisted. And I do know we will be, well, I haven't released it or anything yet, but I do have audio. I do have proofs of my parents brainwashing my children for the case. This was it was conspiring to kidnap. That's what it is, conspiracy to kidnap. And they planned this out. So we have audio of my father talking about, oh, my son said the right thing to the doctor, but my daughter's starting to speak up, and what are we going to do about it? And yeah, different things like that. So, I know it's a convoluted answer. My children know and love me. I don't know, my oldest daughter, they were targeting, they were alienating us very much when we've been close my whole life. Or her whole life, I should say, excuse me. I was thinking about the fact that I'd always promised that I would have a great relationship with my daughters, because my mother was actually, my main covert abuser my entire life. And, that's why I left everything. I wanted my children to grow up in a grounded, traditional and humble way so that they could be productive as they grew up and didn't have the struggles that I had growing up and that I face today by, being raised in an elite family where, under the guise of wealth and lifestyle, you're really kept pretty out of the loop and pretty incapacitated, and you have no idea that you're even in that state. So anyways, maybe that's another show, and that goes into familial trafficking and the elites and all of that. That would also then go back to Finder's cult. So maybe we did just make another show right there. But, that's the gist of it. I can't wait to see my children again someday soon, hopefully. I know that, the American people that keep supporting and keep talking out and tagging, Trump, or tagging even different people. It doesn't have to be Trump. Tagging your local or your state representatives, or tagging press, or tagging large influencers and things that just have larger platforms, is my point, to get the word out about this. People have been so amazing and so steadfast. This has definitely been a marathon, and I pray, to just see the day that my children are running into my arms, and, we'll fix. I know God will heal whatever brainwashing or, whatever they've told, my father said, we're telling the children that mommy's sick and we're getting her help like a doctor. That's
Yeah,
what my
right,
father's
right,
recorded
right.
saying, and it's really horrendous. These children had a beautiful future, and again, God's plan, and God has a journey for everyone. And my children are not even my own; they belong to God, and I know that first and foremost. But what John Walsh has done is just one example of what the system is doing to children. It is not just some logistical law systemic thing. We are changing the futures for children and families, and not in great ways. I'm pushing to see thriving families. I'm pushing to see a system that isn't incentivized where funding goes towards housing or food or the things that it was originally supposed to be before people like the Clintons and John Wall, the International Center, the National Center, all these NGOs, Catholic Church, whatever, put it all together, right? Came around for this child safety and protection grift. It needs to end. And we need to get more involved locally in our communities as well as our states, because that is the most effective way to protect our children and be hands-on and effective when and if something does happen. We'll also see the issues around children's safety and protection decrease significantly once this is addressed, because of again, like we said, the stats, create funding. So once we see that, we would see a huge decrease, and we would see something that's much more realistic, much more manageable, and that we as the society can actually do something about.
Absolutely. And there was in the chat was mentioned one of my favorite shows. I didn't watch America the Most Wanted very much, but at the same time, you had Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, and there was a bit of a crossover there. They were kind of similar in certain ways. I'm wondering, did you watch Unsolved Mysteries? I think it did a lot of great work. And did your father have any kind of relationship with Robert Stack?
Well, everyone thought that they were each other, right? So we would get, a lot of, oh, Robert Stack, and it was, no, it's
Yes.
John
Yeah.
Walsh,
Yeah. Yeah.
that. Oh, your dad, the guy from Unsolved Mysteries. I think I
Yeah.
probably more than he did, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, but that's interesting that that comes up, because it's a concept that I've mentioned before, and is not my own. I wish I had remembered this podcaster. I think it was even on your show that I said this exact same thing before. I wish I remembered the podcaster so I could give him the credit. But it's, there was a real era of propaganda, with cops and America's Most Wanted, Unsolved
Hmm.
Mysteries, so
Yes.
on and so forth, that really came about.
Cops,
And
the show Cops, right?
yeah,
Bad
the
boys,
show
bad boys. Yeah.
cops, it started this propaganda, right? Like
Propaganda.
glamorizing,
Yeah. Yeah.
idolizing cops. John Walsh, everyone thought John Walsh was a cop. He's never been a cop before in his
Yeah.
life, nor is he a child abuse expert, by the way. Okay, so the court
Hmm.
should have listened to that. So I digress, but I think that people don't realize what that also psychologically, how that affected the American people, what the purpose of that was. Propaganda, meaning propaganda to elevate policing, right? When we're talking about surveillance state, when we're talking about police state, we have to understand what paid ops are. We have to understand what the agendas are that these celebrities are assigned to. John Walsh is known as the guy with the black leather jacket, right? Well, that really distracted from all the legislative work, all of the things that he's passed, all of the disputes and controversial things that he's tried to do behind closed doors, things like that. So we have to look at it. It really made us look at policing, and again, give that authority. Or we have to, it took them from like peace officers or people within the community into this elevated state, qualified immunity, things like that. But then get the people to, it's basically like paid opposition, right? Give them free
Hmm.
trauma-based mind control, traumatize them, give them a solution that actually benefits you in the end, and get them to beg for it. So that's been a big issue with me and my father and I for a long time, especially with the
Yeah.
facial recognition
Yeah.
and things like that, just
Well,
initiatives like that.
I would love to see, just as RFK Jr. is the only one that has ever focused attention on the chronic illness in America and the medical industrial complex. Basically, and nobody in public life really is critical of that at all. And you see what the result was when he was being questioned by all these people that get big pharma money. But no, there are very few critics of CPS other than people like you. that you have experienced it firsthand, or unfortunately, the late Beverly Schaefer and her husband, in Georgia, the CPS. And it's
Yeah.
amazing because I mean, I've interviewed several of these people besides you. I've had other people on the show that had their kids taken. I had a couple I've had on several times that it's an ongoing story. They had their kids taken. They got them back, but in the intervening time, one of them developed autism because they made him get the vaccinations that his parents
Yeah.
had made him get, and so there are horror stories everywhere out there. But I'm not aware of any politician other than the late Beverly Schaefer that
Mhm.
talks about this. Do you when you're I don't know if you're able to lobby politicians on it. Is anybody, Thomas Massey, anybody that, anybody's receptive to any of the things you're saying, you think, on Capitol Hill?
I have heard, behind the scenes, if you through the grapevine, right? I guess if you will, that there are some that are interested in kind of watching what I'm doing. So I would obviously, anyone that knows me, I say, why are we still even at this point? We could have this done and over with if we actually just got serious about it. But I'm going to take it where I can. I do have, I guess I could say that I do have some contacts coming up that we are more in contact with politicians and representatives. So it's hopeful. I don't like to put stuff out that I can't make promises on or get people's hopes up, but I'm also not going to say that there's nobody. So sorry for that answer, but that's
Well,
where
no, well, I would think Thomas Massey, I think he's the best man in Congress. So
yes, yeah.
I would be shocked if he doesn't. I mean, he's the only one that stood up to APAC, and that's the downside. Somebody mentioned in obviously the chat of that. Well, Trump is doing what looks like this, kind of, again, we don't know what's going to come of it, but in terms of disclosure and everything, a lot of this is revolutionary. Just opening up the books and people seeing some of the stuff, whether he does anything, whether he really shuts down the Department of Education, all these things, which would be, incredibly, again, revolutionary. At the same time, he's doing, and I don't want to get too much off topic because it's not really in your I guess theater, but the thing where he wants to take over Gaza now and display. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? I don't really understand how that's making it, and it really it clashes with all the other stuff he's doing. What are your thoughts on that?
I have to agree that it clashes, and I think that that's probably the extent of my thoughts on that. To be honest, Don,
Right? Yeah,
I
exactly.
I
Yeah.
do stay out of the whole Gaza thing. I think that we all have life experiences that lead us to different lanes. And when we can be great in our lanes and we stay on that, we get more done. So, the Gaza thing and all of it, I just pray for everyone. I don't think that anyone should be fighting or unnecessarily dying or,
Yes. Yes.
having anything with the children or any of it. So, I'm just going to stay that neutral there. But I do think that it doesn't align, and I would like to see how he navigates that or how that ends up panning out because I do like him. He is probably one of my greater hopefuls, right? I will just put it that way. But again, we're all
Yeah.
talking about politics at this point. To me,
Right.
like you said, what politician besides Nancy Schaefer has said anything? And we can't, we're
Right.
at a point now, just like I would tell the social workers, just like I would, when I speak out to anyone within the system, asking them to come forward, it goes the same for politicians. At this point, ignorance is no longer an excuse. Everyone knows what's going
Hmm.
on. So you can't claim ignorance, especially in that position, because and especially if you have any say in funding. Like the governors of every state at this point are ignoring child trafficking. They're not only ignoring it in their state,
Yes.
they're funding it. They are giving the money and they are the facilitators. It could not be going if they weren't giving the funding and allotting the funding. And
Yes.
no one wants to focus on really approaching their governors and really holding these people to the fire. Originally it was all save the children. And now it's like, everything but. I mean, we just got paper straws out and what's next? Kids going to Mars before we talk about American children,
Yes, we got the straws back, so
Yeah.
but
Great.
people are excited.
I'm happy about that. I'm not dogging that whatsoever because he is right. Those things are wretched, and I of course no one wants to be wasteful or anything like that, but they're wretched. Okay, let's just own it. So that is definitely a great thing, but this needs to be addressed. The children are supposed to be first. All these other issues, if we cared about how we raise children and we looked at societally, what are we doing, then a lot of the issues that are created by grown children that we're dealing with today would not be happening if they were raised maybe a little differently. I digress, but that could be again another show in
Yeah,
itself.
yeah. Well, you're right, and your situation, and I don't know. I'm not sure if what had happens to your children, you and your children, hadn't happened to you, maybe you would feel completely differently. I don't know about you might not be as interested in this subject, obviously, but the people I've had on my show and that I know about, every one of those cases where CPS is involved, we see this municipal corruption at the lower level. That's why I think it's great if we can start exposing the corruption at the federal level for people to understand that it really does trickle down all the way to the lowest level, the school boards and the local, obviously the police, CPS, and I'm sure in your situation you saw the same thing. Is that there's nobody's on your side when there's an effort to take your kids for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's for in your case it was just probably politically targeted maybe, and your dad was involved. But
Yes.
there's no the police never come and the goal it seems to never now. Twisted Pistol says his wife is a social worker, and she's seen a lot of examples where she claims CPS tries to keep the kids with their parents. Well, that's great because I've heard so many of the other things. It seems like that's never the goal. That the goal is to take them at the drop of a hat. If a neighbor says, and I've had people in the show, a neighbor said one of the kids looked too skinny. Okay,
Yeah,
we better take him then. Yeah,
well, that's what people aren't understanding, and I know that, it's not to say there's always exceptions to the rules, right? You can't talk about anything in this world in a blanketed way, or approach. But the
right.
thing that people are understanding, for example, like you're saying, Twisted Pistol saying that, she sees them trying to keep kids. Well, there is an issue with CPS that children that are actually being abused or do need help are not getting the help. If they do get taken in by CPS, then they are put in foster centers. They're put in homes, not like private foster parent homes. I mean, homes for children, right? With multiple children, foster villages, right? It takes a village. No, it doesn't, by the way. That's the Clinton mind, crap. We'll just say that. Okay, let's right here.
Mm,
But what I'm saying is it's part of the grift. It's like National Center for Missing Exploited Children. Yes, we can say, oh, we found Elizabeth Smart. Oh, we found this child, but it's very few and far between compared to the majority of what your organization or what CP or agency is doing. And yes, to keep it going, they have to put out. So, you see on the CPS website, you see some mom with her children and they say, oh, they helped me get my home. They helped me get my stuff back. They helped me through drug abuse. Yes, they have to have that. That's the crisis actors and the people that are, they take innocent people, they take regular people, and you don't have to know that you're being used in something, So we definitely see that the social workers are being used. You just talk about a trickle down effect. Well, the social workers are the lowest hanging fruit, and the majority of them are so unhealthy, overweight, on prescription medicines, alcoholics, have abuse in their own homes. A lot of the law enforcement that's involved in taking our children, the judges are more criminals than the parents that they're taking the children from in a lot of
mhm.
these cases. The lawyers have substance abuse issues or their own home issues. Everyone has crap. And that's what we have to start understanding about this is it's gotten to such a subjective place where if I get mad at you, I can call CPS and your children are taken. So no, it's not all or the other, right? They mix this up. They have children that they put in the foster homes, and then they have the contracts with the pharmaceutical companies, the local doctors and all of that, and they profit and traffic them that way through the homes, giving every child the same medications every morning, and it's a cocktail of meds and prescriptions, and then they're put out on the street at 18 to a pipeline of prison or trafficking in most cases. And then there's those that are taken from loving homes and wonderful homes because they can be adopted out. And that's when we see a lot of the cases coming from family court. So that's another vein of it. There's so many different ways. It's just like with the National Center. We see, like I said, Elizabeth Smart or something come home, but then we see children that are not even missing being listed and
Right.
exploited, literally exploited for the funding money, or the look of the agency. So it's convoluted. It's definitely convoluted. It's a tricky
It
thing
is.
to wrap your head around, but
And you and
that's
you and you happen to, unfortunately, in your situation, you happen to have a person involved in John Walsh as your father who nobody at that level is going to go against, because not only is he, a celebrity, but he's
right.
seen, as we mentioned before, he's seen as this is Mr. Law Enforcement. This is a
Yes.
guy, he's found all the kids, and he's America's Most Wanted.
Well,
He's
he's
getting
thrown
these
law
bad
enforcement
guys. He's a
themselves.
hero. He's a hero to every cop and every local level probably, and no judge is going to go against that. So that you really had no chance. I'm sorry, to say, with
Especially
John
a
Walsh on
judge
the
that
other side.
worked for especially a judge that worked for the sheriff's department with the
Yeah,
sheriff that got in.
yeah.
And I mean, the whole thing, it was so, they were all on the same team to get working together. I had no chance, to be honest. But I did my best. And again, I do have a federal case. I filed federal RICO against all of them, and my case was accepted. I actually filed the same day in the same courthouse that Trump did, down in Fort Pierce, Florida, and my case was accepted, and I was assigned the same judge as Trump as well, Eileen Cannon. But then that's when the judge and everyone we were just talking about found out about it, and we see the taking of my beautiful 5-day-old Esther Grace in a swatting of the house in retaliation. So we've
Yeah.
started playing a lot of that body cam. I've started feeling better about kind of bringing that stuff back up and showing the public the body cam and the collusion and the conspiring that happened between my father and the police, the courts, and CPS. So that'll be coming up more and more as well. I've got some things up my sleeve, but we'll keep them there for right now. We'll
Yeah,
keep-
well, how close is your oldest child to being an adult? Because once they come of age, then you obviously they can't stop you from seeing them at that point, correct?
right, but I can't even think about that. I have a very young family, Don. My
Right.
my
That's I didn't, yeah, I thought so, but I just
And I think that if they aren't home within the next year, we'll be talking a lot differently on a show a year from now, if they're still not home, between you and I.
absolutely. Well, it's
I
we
won't have
have
as
to.
much grace. I'll say that. And I also
Yeah.
want to say, I want people to understand that when my children come home, I will still be doing this. I was an advocate speaking out about the corruption within CPS, its connection to the Epstein list that everyone was begging for, and
Yeah.
family court, and it being our domestic child trafficking before my children were ever taken. My children were at awareness events that I held, bridge walks that I held for my community. I was involved in my community, and I was asking, I was getting involved locally. What is going on at our local foster home? I heard rumors of trafficking there, for example, and things. So I was getting involved locally, which also then, when my father did this to cover my questions of the National Center and Adam's case and everything, he already naturally had a local racket there that was more than willing to participate in this with me, because I was exposing what they were doing as well. So
What do you think of Cash Patel? He's a bit of a loose cannon, perhaps. And if he gets in
wild
there, I can see maybe you'd have some hope there. I mean, this guy, he might go after CPS. I don't know. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, I think that if CPS isn't gone after by whoever it is soon, that we will have a nation of parents that will not take it anymore. I know a lot of people we're all being cool. We're giving Trump his time. We're waiting patiently because we are parents, right? We have children, so we know how to do that a little better. But we're all in pain. This is daily torture, and there are children. So with Cash, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. He's a bit of a wild card. Like I'll say about any politician or anyone in this, I'm watching to see. I've seen things that are very encouraging, and I've seen things that, are questionable, including his possible involvement with, aspects of child trafficking. So, and as well as Pam Bondi, ignoring things
Yeah,
that were
yeah.
going on in Florida. So, we're very aware of those things, but we want these people to do better. We want, again, I guess I'm grown now, Don. If I'm at the phrase of picking the lesser of two evils, that's why I never voted growing up, and my parents were always so mad at me for not getting
Sure.
involved in politics, because I was like, that phrase, as a young adult, or younger than now, that phrase just seemed absolutely ludicrous to me. I could not wrap my head around, how that works out. But I guess we're here now, and not saying that any of these people are evil, but I just, again, there's not an answer, a definitive answer either way, because we have to wait and see what they're doing. But I think that, and I know that we are at a place in the CPS issue. I mean, God bless you. This is also in
Thank
the
you.
UK. This is in Australia. This is happening all over the world, with whatever it's called there. They have Kafka and like all these different, it's under all different names depending on where you are. But we're having issues with this and what's going on all over. So if people that are in position now are not going to address it, they will, there will be problems. I'm not like saying, violence or anything, but people are going to be much more pressing on the issue, right? And try to take more action, because this is the most important thing. I mean, people don't understand that as we're talking on this right now, children are being taken from their homes, children are being trafficked, families are losing rights for the rest of their children who can't speak for themselves because they're under 18 are losing their own rights to their own biological families. I mean, we don't even talk or think about what actual children's rights are. We're just adults saying we know and we know better. So taking children and putting them in a home with a stranger and telling them to be happy, here's your new life, and paying the stranger instead of trying to look at what family issues are and where they're stemming from societally, and how to make that child's biological home and primary environment thrive and be a good place for the child. That's actually the best interest. It's not throwing the families out of America. It's not, it's loving thy neighbor as thyself, because that is actually the best interest of the child and our future as a society.
Absolutely. So when you start this, because again, I love the title, America's Most Corrupt. What are your plans? Or are you going to interview other people that have been touched by CPS, or just going to talk and use a video or whatever? What do you plan for the show? I assume you haven't started it yet. I don't know.
Yeah, no. Well, we're planning the content right now for the first episode, and so in the beginning, what I'm going to do, and I kind of mentioned it in the beginning, but in the beginning of the podcast, the first couple episodes, I'm really going to take time to explain, how I arrived here, my situation, how that relates. As well as the research, just kind of recap that for people in one place in terms of the connections between National Center, the issues within CPS, so on and so forth, right? And then start bringing in people, like you said, start bringing in CPS issues, start bringing in people to interview, like ex-CPS workers or different people of that nature. And then as well as have the opportunity and give the opportunity to the public to email us, write into us, and let us know about a local corruption of your own or something
Yes,
that
yes.
you're
Yep.
dealing with, so that we can start, again, America's Most Corrupt. We want to be covering not just these big national stories. We have small town corruption that is more prevalent than the mass murderer, in
Yeah.
each of our lives, with all due respect. It is what it is, right? So I want to give that opportunity, and we plan on covering that for people. I've got some cases already that we're getting the documentation sent over to cover in the beginning, and we're just going to keep moving on. I mean, I think that the content might be endless until we get all this figured out. But yeah, we're going to explore different aspects of corruption. And really try to keep the focus on what kind of corruption touches the masses every day.
Yeah, because we're told. Listen, that's what we have to. This is the
And
single
what we
most
can do
important.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the single most important in America. And I think what's happening with maybe Doge and at least some of this corruption is being exposed for all the world to see. I mean, the people that are naive enough to not understand it, that this is corrupt from top to bottom. But your case, and you have a little bit more of a platform in terms of because of you're outspoken and your father was famous. So you're not really as isolated from the public as a lot of people I hear from that nobody knows about. But in their life, this was 9/11. This was the JFK
Yes.
assassination because it disrupted their lives. It showed that God, these people are so corrupt. Why are these people wanting to take my kids from me? Why are they doing what they're doing? And we see these to those cases, those local cases, and you'll find obviously when you talk to them that to them this is a huge deal. It matters to them. It's like if you're, you know,
Important.
when you're there's a skirmish or a military skirmish, and we only had 8 casualties or something. Well, to those 8 families, you know
Right.
that they're not going to be consoled by that. So I
Exactly.
this is what I think people need to realize that there are small, seemingly small stories, but they all add up, don't they? To show you that this massive corruption, because you don't hear I don't hear many good stories about CPS. Maybe, and with all due respect, Twisted Pistol says his wife at least experienced some of those. But it just seems to me that they want to come in and their main focus most of the time it seems to be is to break up the family.
It is. It's systemically what it's designed for. So that's also where we get into the argument of whether an individual is a good person or not. We're not talking about an individual. We're talking about a system that was set to operate and created to operate exactly as it is. It wasn't meant to be showing thriving families. When that happens, that's a great thing, or that's an anomaly within what it was designed to be. But also, while the system is still existing, we ask for good workers. We want you. I had 3 whistleblowers and 2 others from the department come forward, even testify against the state on our behalf. And do the right thing. And that's what I advocated my entire case to every worker that I came in contact, is just gracefully explain the reality of what they're participating in and telling them that they can come forward, that they can do the right thing. And if they remain, it's not about leaving or doing anything. It's about remaining in that. And you can be that good caseworker. You can speak up to that corrupt state attorney that is maliciously prosecuting families to take their children, for example. So, there's different ways to work through it. It's not to say that there aren't good people in the system, but that's not what we're talking. That's not what the issue is with what we're talking about. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. They're good, and they're good people at all levels. I mean, somebody like Thomas Massey, I think, is very good in Congress, and a couple others. But there are good people in school boards, good people in schools, good people in businesses, government, everywhere. But they're so outnumbered. It just
Right.
that they can't do anything. So, and the
Well,
people that are
I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, and it's great that you bring this up because, that is part of America's Most Corrupt. That is part of my motivation behind this, is because, just like I've done for these families for the past 4 years, this is another way to give the voiceless or people without these platforms a voice, or to even just expose, a situation like what many others are going through, right? And when we're looking at things and we want more control, and if you are, behind Trump and everything, then he keeps saying, take everything back to the states and local, and that's something that I've said from day one. It's what I mentioned earlier about the issues with funding the funding towards the national center, the ineffective aspects of it. So I think that when we're talking about these different aspects of corruption, when we're seeing also, like you just mentioned, what's going on with Doge, what's going on with these revelations about funding and what's being used, it's also educating and equipping the public. It's up to you. It's up to you to do something with that in your relative world, right? In your community, in your family, in your life. And, it feels really good to do that, actually. And I couldn't pick a better hill, to be on than the kids issue. I will say that. And I hope that more will join us in that, because everyone should really be vocal about it so that we can get this done. But I think that it'll eventually, we're getting there, Don. We're getting there.
No, we
It's
are, and I just and we've got there's so much that we could talk about, but um, I think Cash Patel also hasn't he alluded to releasing the Epstein list, which I don't really understand because it was about a year ago. I remember writing about it in Substack that a judge ordered the release of the Epstein official Epstein list, I guess, whatever that is, and we never saw it. So I don't know
mhm.
what the point of that was. So I mean, what do you? I mean, is there? Because I get the idea with Epstein. I think it's a bit of it's inaccurate really to call this pedophilia because it seems like they were mostly dealing with teenage girls, and there's a different name for that. I think maybe they were younger than that, but it seemed to me that most of them were teenagers. And it's still wrong, obviously, but I think it's a little bit of a different category. So I don't know if there's much of a crossover into You think there's any connection there with CPS? Because Epstein is trafficking. Epstein is a very strange character. You know, he
Yeah,
was
I mean,
inter- he, wa-
there's teenagers in CPS, Don. You know, we know that
right,
over
right, right.
88%, we know that over 88% of child trafficking comes from the foster care system. So, you know,
Yeah,
I
yeah, that's
already,
terrible.
and then the issue within the CPS system is that runaways aren't reported. And so that's how they say when a kid goes missing or something, oh, they must have run away. You know, there's so many loopholes there that leave these children up to disappearing very easily, and it being enabled and just, oh, well, right? So, and that's something that the National Center was very good at establishing that perspective and that notion. So, uh, you know, I think Epstein, it's really hard for me, Don, because I get a little, I don't even know the word for it because I know people, that's what they know, right? They know to ask for the Epstein list. Oh, we want the Epstein list. We want the Epstein. We know
Right.
the Epstein list, you guys. You could figure out the Epstein list. You don't need a gatekeeper to hand you a list. Like we are showing you the NGO. Look at these people. Richard Branson is right here founding and funding the International Center for Missing Exploited Children while he is donating and founding with Ghislaine Maxwell Terramar, you know, for example. We've got the World Economic Forum here on the board of the National Center. Why aren't we looking at the nation and globe's authority on children when we're talking about child trafficking and wondering where this is coming from? Why haven't we wondered all these missing kids? Just like you said, families have stories. Well, all of these missing kids on these databases have stories. What are the stories behind how they went missing? A lot of it will be from that familial trafficking, right? But also, we have the issue that's been hidden, which is the children that are being trafficked from CPS to people like Epstein and different things, teenagers. I'm not saying it has to be children or babies. That's that's the adoption fraud. That's the adoption trafficking, medical kidnapping, things like that when you're getting younger. And not to say that they don't cross over. So, you know, again, it's a very convoluted situation, but people need to stop being so reliant on that Epstein list before they can
Right.
move forward with ending, you know, child trafficking. You have to understand, if we understand that these people and Epstein, his network and everything operated on blackmail, then like I said earlier, who has the largest child porn database in the world? The National Center for Missing Exploited Children. With every corporation,
Wow.
yeah, every corporation.
Larger than the Pentagon? I thought the Pentagon did.
Well, I mean, they get it through the National Center. That's the bigger thing, though. Is the National Center an NGO or is it a government agency fronting as a nonprofit?
So this is public knowledge. So I mean, is there excuse that it's like Pete Townsend of the Who when he was caught with it? He was just doing research. I mean, why would that makes? I mean,
About how that could be used, right? If you are an Epstein type or you're in blackmail or government and you have, you know, everyone reporting from the public, any C scam, any, you know, black market porn, anything that they found, then you have a whole library. Do you think that if politicians or anyone are participating in this, that one out of all those millions of videos isn't going to have somebody in it, or for example, or
sure, sure.
I mean, you have to look at the other side of things, right? Like the nefarious ways that something could be used. It's not saying that it is. It's not saying that, you know, anything other than you need to be aware and look and question what this is. And that's also what we need to be demanding as the people from these organizations, from these figures, is the answers to the public's questions, right? A lot of these people get to just be silent and we keep going and we keep having the family tragedies. We keep losing our kids. We keep, you know, this goes on and on. So it's about those nuances that, you know, we have to look at and really hold accountability to. I mean, we're sitting P. Diddy, hello, you know, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
whole Diddy thing. And now Kanye's coming out saying free Diddy because he'll do
Yes, yes.
a new album promotion, you know. And I mean, people that know my stuff know that I came out about Kanye's involvement and how they traffic through the industry and all of it. So, you know, everyone's kind of really showing their true colors now as well, including my father. And I think that people are at a much different place when they're looking at these people and questioning, which is very encouraging. I hope people continue to do that. I hope people continue to look at both sides of things in a healthy manner, question things for your own, empowerment, for your own ability to create, your community and to protect the things that matter to you.
Yeah, exactly. And but this there's so many powerful figures that are involved, not only with Epstein, but with Diddy, the more recent, I guess, younger group. That I just to expose that and to you're talking about the house of cards comes crumbling down because I mean there's so many prominent people that were and one thing I think to the masses, the normies out there, the things that's easiest to get them to become awake instantly is something like that kids are being trafficked sexually. That everybody, you can't talk to them about 9/11 or JFK or anything like that maybe, but that will get them. That's why I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but Seymour Hersh talked about he claimed that he had seen videos from of the U.S. military troops raping Iraqi boys in front of their screaming mothers. And
Mm-hmm.
he said like 15 years ago, he talked about, oh, it's going to come out. You're going to see it. And I called him at his home a couple of years ago and actually talked to him briefly, but I couldn't get him to talk about that because I said, what happened to that? But just imagine something like that. If that is so, if that's seen, there's suddenly, I mean, just look at all the things that become instantly discredited. No more support the troops. If you're
Mm-hmm.
seeing them do that, no more. So there's these things that have the potential to, that's why I'm very skeptical that because I don't know how many, even if they're not involved in it, just to be
That's
able,
I think
for
that that's been a big frustrating thing is this excuse a lot of people use, and I know that they believe it, with their hearts. It's not, they're not saying anything, but it's, oh, the public, we have to wait. They have to wait for the public to be ready for
yeah,
public
yes, yes,
disclosure. The public won't be able to handle it. All that it's all BS, and I can't
yeah,
wait for people to be sick of that who actually do care. If you're somebody that does care about the CPS thing and you're still holding to that, that's a mute point. That's an excuse. That's a gatekeeping. Are we saying that the public can't handle the realities, but the children that this is happening to need to keep handling it? I mean, there's so many things I could say to that, Don. So, it's just really a sick statement or an excuse because the children that are going through this, the families, all of it, they aren't ready. They can't digest this stuff. And we need the public, who aren't being affected, aren't victims, aren't being terrorized, to support. That's not rocket science. That's pretty much how
yeah,
society is supposed to work.
yeah,
And so, this whole, these people that are perpetuating this messaging of, oh, the public, we have to wait for the public to be ready. The public isn't ready. Just be weary or be aware of the people that are saying that kind of stuff and whether they're gatekeeping or what side they're actually on. And again, not to say that there's something nefarious at all. Maybe they're just repeating it because it's a common thing that's being said now. But we need to stop that. We need to, when we hear it, kind of gracefully say, with all due respect, there's never going to be a good time. This needs to come out. And, I always, I'll leave it at this on this topic, but I always refer to it like birth, right? I've given birth to 4 children naturally. And when a mother is in natural birth and you start to hear her say, oh my gosh, I can't do it. What was I thinking? You know that the baby's coming in 2 seconds, and after the baby comes, you forget about the pain. They say that's why women have the babies, right, guys? That we forget about the pain. And
yes, yeah,
and then you're left with this fresh, hope and this new life and this new family and future, right? So that's how I kind of compare it to where we are with this. If we can just get through those birth pains and realize, when we say, oh, we can't do this and it's too much, then it's probably when we're right there where we need to be. And if we can just push through this, then we can be going and moving on towards better ways. We can't implement better ways and propose better ways to handle the real situations of abuse and neglect and the things that we're talking about if we still have this junked up in the way, right? I mean, it's going to keep going the way that it is and worse because people like John Walsh are doing things like he did to me in a courtroom behind closed doors and creating these events that then leave our American families more susceptible because they're passing things like children can be removed based on any subjective thing that they deem. And people like my father are facilitating that, like I said, behind closed doors. We've seen it with, what was it, Jesse Smollett and the lynching law, different, the hoax there.
Mm-hmm.
We see a lot of stuff. My dad straw manned me. It's a wild reality. But anyways, we just have to understand that these different things happen. And I'm only one speaking for, countless people in varying degrees of this corruption.
That's great. It's nice to know that the lovely Sarah Westall is watching. She sent me a message on Twitter. Great interview with Megan Walsh. Good to see
Oh,
you out there, Sarah. Sarah does great work too. And but what I think is amazing is though, if people when they because we live in this, especially with the left, the Democrats, everything's for the children. For the children. What about the children? They use children as props. They exploit them for whatever they're trying to sell all the time. And but when we see something like going back to the McMartin preschool scandal, something like that, if you watch, and I wrote about that in history, if you watch the way the media slant is usually going to be, you think in sympathy with the children, but not in this case. The media was so slanted and biased against the children. We're preschoolers,
mhm.
and it's to see that happen is amazing. And then of course, even to now today, if you see specials on it and stuff, they will just completely gloss over the fact. Because one of the stories, I'm sure you know about this, you know about everything. One of the stories the preschoolers were talking about was that there were tunnels under the school, and that they had, the teachers were dressing as characters, and of course doing all these awful things to them. But they said they found no evidence of tunnels. Well, they had a citizens group, that later got an excavation out there, and they found the tunnels. And
Intent,
this was
yeah.
after and there was no story that said, hey, actually, maybe there was something to this. They found that nothing. They just threw it down the memory hole. Do you? I'm sure you know about that, right?
That was, I mean, same thing. Finders, McMartin, just like you brought up. I mean,
Yeah.
they're not looking at the children. The children are an exploit. The children are a liability in those situations, because we have to look at who the main players in those situations were. Those were Finders cult was CIA backed and connected. McMartin was wealthy and plugged in, family in the community and deeper. So, you know, we see stuff like that happen.
No, yeah, but we see, again, the ones. So when you juxtapose that against, I've said this for a long time. When you look at the transgender movement, again, this is related in some way, because they want to give children the right to make these ridiculous decisions that, even okay, if you even say, okay, you can be trapped in the wrong body or whatever. I don't think anyone would say, okay, well, if that's going to happen, you have to be an adult. You should be able to, because you can't. I don't understand. You can't legally have sex as a child or as an underage person, but you can change your sex. I don't get that. And of course, all the power, and they're doing this. They don't even want to inform parents in Great Britain. I think they passed along California too, at least at one or two states here, where if a parent doesn't go along with the insanity of this gender reassignment or whatever they're doing, if they say no, you're not doing this, they can take the children away. Do you know anything about that? I guess they use CPS for that as well, but I mean that's just monstrous. But again, it's when they pick and choose to make the children the victims, because apparently they're not the victims in something like McMartin. They're the finders.
You're exactly right. And I love that you pointed this out. I think that example even holds true within the whole trans issue. In some places, they're taking children if you are, pro transition, and you're, allowing that, and you're supporting your child in that. And then there's other places who are going to take your children, for not supporting it, right, and not doing that. So, the bottom line is that they want our children. I hate that it sounds that, sensate. They want your children. I'm not trying to fearmonger. It's just the basics of it. They want the children. Children are money. If, the children, the Finders and McMartin didn't work for them, so they got denied. The children that, are saying we're abused or, different things, then that works for them. So then they're going to accept it, and they're going to go along with, in school, oh, I got mad at my mom, so I'm going to say she yelled at me too much. And there's a CPS worker. And so they're going to say, oh, okay, we have to take the child now, it's so many different, convoluted ways that this is twisted. I also have to say I was a little preoccupied because I was reading comments, and I keep seeing Twisted Pistol. I don't know what's going on here. But I see he keeps saying, hang on, it just went up a little bit. Sorry. He's saying most kids are abused by family members, sexual, mental, and physical.
Yes,
It's
yes,
usually
yeah.
a family member. He's saying all teachers are mandated CPS reporters, and family members are the usual predators or abusers from my wife's experience. With all due respect, I will say your wife is only one person. I would like to remind you of that, one person in one area, respectfully. And second of all, yes, if it's not a stranger abusing the child and there is actual abuse happening, then it is going to be a family member. We have to, that's like making a statement that's kind of, what am I trying to say here? That's making a statement that is stating the obvious. Like, we're talking about children. They aren't out in the world. They aren't independent. They're not interacting with a bunch of other things. We know that when something happens to a child, going missing or murder, things like that, it's usually a family member or someone close to the family. So that's going to ring true with abuse. But we also have to look at what we are defining abuse as and what we are looking like. For example, this mandated mandated reporters are very dangerous for families and for America. And what we're finding also is that most mandated reporters, they will not, when it's an actual abuse thing, like, for example, I have many examples in my case specifically where the mandated reporters do not report at all. But then we have a flip side of the issue with mandated reporters where they are being placed in schools where children are being interviewed by these strangers without their parents. In what society, in what day were children allowed to be talked to under 18 by strangers? I don't care what your excuse is. I don't care what your guide, what any of it is. If there's an issue going on, then there's a different way to do that. You don't get to go into a school and corner a child without the parents' knowledge or consent and question them, because a lot of grooming happens. We can talk, you want to talk about mandated reporters or teachers. We have a way bigger issue with teachers grooming children. Again, this is not one vein. You can't say one thing is exactly the main thing, or this
Right.
is what happens. There's no absolutes in this whatsoever. But again, we addressed familial trafficking. Yes, it happens very prevalently, and that is the main form of trafficking that's been covered in America, been covered up in America, with the exact opposite, right? Almost stranger danger. So,
Well, yeah, exactly. And we've all heard that you're most likely if a child's abused is going to be a family member. I guess that's true. I don't know, but I do know that teachers, especially when you looked at during the schools were closed, when you saw the TikTok videos and stuff, and people started realizing how crazy some of these, especially young teachers are, and
teachers
how
are grooming the children to even traffic each other, abuse each other, traffic,
yeah,
exploit
yes,
each
they,
other.
well,
We have video of CPS workers telling the children to go learn how to be a prostitute to get food.
yeah, well, I mean, just the fact that I coached youth sports for many years. I coached my kids for a decade in soccer and basketball and baseball. And I know that because it's, an authority figure like that, one thing you're not going to talk about to kids ever is sex. You're not going to allude to it at all. Otherwise, you're going to get in big trouble. But these teachers openly look for it and talk, and it's just part of the curriculum. And in terms of, I think Twisted Pistol is right. A lot of them, especially the Karen types, they're looking. Oh, what is that? A bruise? Is that a bruise on your shoulder? How did that
Yeah,
happen? Which is really none of their business. And
exactly.
or something like I don't know. How do you feel? Do you really think maybe you think you were born the wrong gender? Because this is the kind of stuff they do, and I think it's insidious, and I think Twisted
And the
Pistol. I
workers,
think
the social workers do it as well to the children. It's
oh
absolutely amazing
yes,
to see how these quote unquote social workers they can change your whole entire life. These social workers ruined and tore my family apart for their subjectivity. When I knew the bar that they did lines of coke off of in town, I knew the, domestic situations that they had in their own homes. It was just, it's absolutely insane when you're in the system to see the depravity, the way the courts are working. The judges aren't running anything in there. The DCF workers or the CPS attorneys are. And that's how the trickle down that you brought up earlier happens, because we've got the funding coming in, then it's distributed amongst departments and counties and all of that. So everyone's vying for it. And you need to have more kids taken to get more funding, right? And then the prosecutors are maliciously prosecuting, making up
Yeah.
crazy, insane allegations. Like, the people that are actually prosecuting and making these allegations up and things really should be the ones to have mental health checks, because what
Yeah.
we're seeing is so depraved. We're seeing with policing too. They exaggerate the situation. They, more credit to them, more funding, all of that. So, follow the money is real. And it is that trickle down effect where then the administrators of these, county departments, all of that. It's not just the departments. We have to understand these departments are then contracting out these NGOs and local nonprofit organizations to be handling the case plans, which is where the social workers come in. So they're not even directly under the government handling this with our families. I mean, they're directly, like, arguably, but you get what I'm saying. It's not directly the government. You're not dealing with the federal CPS agency when you're doing, your case plan, right? You're working with a local organization with people and women that in your town, in your small town, that can have biases against you. Again, everyone involved in my case had an automatic bias against me because I was already an advocate against the exact work that they do. So,
Mhm.
it didn't even need to be John Walsh. All these people went along with it because they didn't want me speaking out in the town, and
Right.
exposing this kind of stuff. So, especially
Yeah.
when I'm talking about judges and police and all of it. So, it definitely trickles down. And then the social workers actually are the ones who should come forward, should be running out the gate to come forward, because, Twisted Pistol, we paid attention to the things because I wanted to address some of that. But, a lot of this he's been talking about earlier, what his wife has to do and what she has to ignore and all of these things. And I did see someone earlier take the guts to say, she needs to leave. You're aiding the problem. So if you're going to be going along with this stuff, then you do need to leave, because you are now guilty of child trafficking and kidnapping, whether you like the way that it sounds or not. Um,
Mhm.
and I say that I'm saying this in general to anyone. But the fact is that these social workers are the ones who are pressured by administration to fulfill the quotas or to say this or that in court for this case. The brunt really does come down. I will acknowledge that, to the social workers, and they're treated horribly and they're threatened. And the two that testified against the state for me were retaliated against and
I
fired. And
bet.
oh yeah, they had been their top workers for almost 10 years. They went after one of the admins that had come forward. They went after her license, different things like that. So it is foul, the child trafficking industry that is called, CPS and under the guise of government. Um, it's a really despicable realm.
And Twisted Pistol explains in the chat that his wife was fired. And I can't say the reason why because I don't want the video yanked, and it's a magic word that gets it yanked. And they also lost their home because of that as well. So
Oh my
I
gosh.
yeah,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
awful with some of the things.
Well,
And
God bless you guys. I have to say that you did the right thing.
no, and it's so when you look at this, but this is all part of it, it plays into all these people, all these levels. I think that if their first concern was, but even before the woke agenda, you always had kind of nosy neighbors and people like that that would think somehow, okay, just they're looking for something.
Mhm.
If it's not is do you have a dead sticker on your car or something, or there's too much trash in your backyard. There's the kind of people that
My neighbor said that I left a pizza box on the stove after I had them over and with the kids. So,
they're looking even stuff that ridiculous. And but the idea is that they're not minding their own business, and they love to call the authorities. They just love to they seem to understand how dangerous the authorities are until they're turned on them. But the idea is again just the system, whether it's CPS, social workers, they seem to have such an anti-family bent, and I don't know if this because a lot of them aren't parts of a nuclear family themselves. I get the idea that maybe they're not, especially if you look at some of these teachers. They're clearly not in any nuclear family and don't want to be, and so they look at that as kind of an evil thing, and they think, I believe, that they're, that their children are probably being abused by their parents. And I think
Mhm.
that's why they're looking for signs of this. I mean, they've watched enough movies and TV shows, I guess, to think that. Am I off base there?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone has a level of, vigilance, right? And I think that people that choose that field have maybe a closer, maybe almost a hyper vigilance, or maybe they had their own experiences or different things like that. When you mention teachers or different people that might not have their own, I think people forget that now we've had this system for 20 years or so, and we have people that have been raised in the system that are now adults, right? And we're seeing the effects of that, and they aren't good. We're seeing now, since the heightened removal of children in large cities like Chicago and everything, we see children running the streets shooting each other, and we're wondering why that's happening. But yet we're, excuse me, with no problem and no thought about it, we're taking children from their biological families, which again, we know that the statistics, it's actually better for a child long term, even if there is domestic or drug abuse or anything within the home, for that child to remain in their primary
Yes, yes,
biological
yes.
environment.
Yep, yep.
And that's fundamental, because if you're going back to it, why does everyone, Don, think about, whether you're an atheist or no matter what you decide about God, but everyone at some point thinks about God, right? And why do we make that decision, or why do we have to decide or think about God? Because that's what we know is our place of origin, right? That's our connection, that's our grounding, and where we come from. So if you apply that to the nuclear family, right? The biological family. We are taking these children from their places of origin, from their biological connection, and we are putting them with strangers. Where, again, we also have a lot of children that are now grown up talking about their adoptions and the horrors of their adoptions, or the psychological effects that it had, knowing that, I'm not their biological child, or, when a parent hugs you and you're not their biological child, or things like this. And, or we were told that I was told my parents were drug addicts and that they didn't want me and everything. And I grew up and found them and found out that my whole family was fighting for me through the courts, and I was still
Yeah.
taken. So, and that's something my children will have to grow up and know and have to deal with. This is huge trauma that we're putting in children's
Yeah,
lives. What
absolutely.
we're
Well,
saying,
you mentioned, sir,
issue, Don. I'm sorry, I want to say this. A big issue, I
yes,
think, where the wall comes with CPS is the middle class, the middle and upper working class, if you will, because a lot of them have not, it is affecting the working class and upper working class these days, and because they're so greedy and we need more children. But for point's sake here, if you go around in your community or in the world in reality, not online and not everything, and you talk to real people, everyone's reaction for the most part initially when they hear CPS is, oh my God, how horrible. This is horrible. Most people know that it's actually worse for that child if you see abuse even or anything for you to call CPS. Okay. But that's again another topic. But, we see these things happening. We see, the excuse me, I'm choking over here, Don. Excuse me, audience, for a second. We need to be addressing that, because when we're taking these children and it's part of MK Ultra as well. It immediately splits children. So when you're taking children at birth, when you're taking children at a young age, especially before 7, and that 0 to 7, you are creating trauma, and trauma base opens children up, which children are already opened up to programming and brainwashing and ideologies and things like that. So you are then splitting that child, because you are taking them from their parents. They're supposed to live this other life, but most of the time that's not really the reality of it, so on and so forth. So it's a huge degradation in society when we're allowing this to happen. And yet no one in the realm of child safety and protection, because they all want this to keep going, right? They want us to keep thinking that this is the best option that we have to keep their jobs. A lot of the social worker admin, they just want their next government, promotion. They want their next government bonus. That's what they care, unfortunately, at this point, especially when they're admin or somebody so far removed. And that will go back to that main issue of the working and upper working class being a huge wall for us in CPS, because most people, lower income, very regular working class, they know that CPS is already a danger to our families and our children because a lot of them have experienced it, right? But then when you go into the upper echelons, and not the elites, we're not talking about the poorest, right? Which poverty also does not equate or necessarily mean that there's abuse or neglect as well. That's another huge issue. But we have to be looking at it in that way. And be a little more reserved and a little more aware and question a little more on what is really protecting our children, what really is safety, and what really are their rights. They have a right to their biological. And through paperwork and everything, children's names are changed, the records are kept sealed, all of this, where children are growing up and don't even know who their families are or where they are. My children now are technically my siblings, Don. That's how our system works in records. I mean, how disgusting is that? I don't think we should have to correct it. In Florida, if a child is born and you're married, your husband is automatically put as the father of the child on the birth certificate, regardless of whether he is or not. So children are growing. If you grow up and you want to know who your biological dad was, or you thought your whole life that your mom's husband was your biological dad.
Well, yeah, that opens up a whole new can of worms. But you alluded to it earlier. But one of the most incredible statistics I remember reading a long time ago, most people don't know it, is that why the family structure is so important is that statistics show that even when a child is legitimately being abused at home, it's still a better environment for him than leaving the home.
Yes.
I mean, it seems, but that shows how important the family is. So just think about that. Even then, the statistics everywhere in terms of what the criminal population and how many of them didn't have fathers in the house. I mean, just it's through the roof. So it is very important. So but we have such an anti-family bias, and it's terrible that the people that control this thing, CPS, social workers, and local law enforcement just goes along with them. Nobody bucks the system, but many judges, they all have that same anti-family bias, and I think that's why so many people like you go through these situations, because they don't want the kids with with their parents, and they must not read the studies. I don't know. I'm right about that, right? Even when a kid's being abused, they're actually better off.
Yeah, absolutely, Don. I'm so sorry. You got me riled up. That was the biggest thing through my case. Where are the child trauma specialists? Where are psychologists? Where are people that have, masters in child psychology that are an admin in this department? Things like that. There's no one that's, when I started getting into this and saw how the system was broken down, my first question, again, when I first started getting into it, was, who the heck developed this system? Who came up with this? And of course, secondarily, it was, how the heck did we all allow this to happen and get to this place? But again, I think it's because none of us understood that there was a child protection and safety grift going on in America, and this is their propaganda. This is part of their propaganda. So, we can only do what we can now. The past is the past, but we need to be much more at the level of desensitization, normalizing of this, the lack of, wow, holy cow. I mean, I will be honest, I will be humble. I thought, like you said earlier, House of Cards, Don, I honestly thought, okay, my kids were taken. Everyone knows me in the community. They know what I do. There's no way this will last more than a month or so to get it ironed out. I thought that when I came out about my dad and with the proof and literally living the domestic terrorizing and my children being kidnapped, my children being trafficked, showing the videos, showing up every day, I thought that, everyone for the years that had been screaming Epstein and it's the elites and child trafficking and all these celebrities and, government, again, humbly, I didn't choose this, and I would trade with anyone in a second, believe me, to have my children have peace. But I humbly did think that everyone was going to freak out. I guess I'll keep it that simple. I thought everyone was going to freak out. I thought this was going to end, not end child trafficking, but, expose the National Center, expose
Yeah.
CPS, expose all those figures connected to it, and how that expands out to even this global racket that everyone says so sensationalized, but then that's where it stops. So I humbly admit I'm in a bit of a twilight zone in that regard, because I hear everyone screaming that they want these names and these and who and what and where and when and how. But when they're given it, it's, this cognitive dissonance, or, we see John Walsh walking around for 4 years getting his legacy show back, and, doing more work than he's ever done in the past 10 years. So getting rewarded.
Exactly.
So there's more proof that they
Yeah,
get
yeah.
rewarded. I mean, I
And,
can't
and
get
that
more, It's
that's what
like,
happens. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. That was the old expression, I guess. But we got to wrap it up here. What give us final thoughts and anything you give out your links or anything you want to promote.
well, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Don, for giving me this time and having me on and continually being steadfast and supporting me. And I also want to extend that out to your viewers who have joined when I'm on, and those that are, in this work with me or sharing what we're doing. That's really what we need. We're not asking much. We're asking you to share the information, to stay aware, talk in your circles about this. And, if you feel more compelled to actually get involved in your community, you can look up your own child trafficking racket by looking at who's the CPS department in your county, who are the dependency judges, who are the GALs, who are the social workers, who's within the schools, how do they connect, do they do business together outside of these positions in the public, so on and so forth. What is the funding? What is the rate of return for your local county department of children versus the rate of removals? Things like that. So you can get involved. So I want to encourage people to think about that, to keep spreading the awareness and maybe get a little more rooted in actually doing something about this, because you can. This isn't Epstein makes people think that it's bigger than you and that you can't do anything about it. So you have to wait for gatekeepers to give you the information. That's not what's going on here. CPS is in every one of our counties. It affects and oversees every one of our families and all of our children. They are infiltrating into our schools and hospitals and all of the other stuff. And we just need to be aware, and we need to demand change for the best interest of our children. We want to see thriving families. We're not against anything. We want to see thriving families, and we want to see our taxpayer money and any funding that's going towards that to be used appropriately, not towards salaries and operating fees. So again, I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank you, Don. Please, everyone, come over, follow me on X, Megan Walsh _. I'm heavily shadow banned, but over 4 years, every day and night and through the night, we've made it to over 60,000 followers. Please come join me over on Locals. I'm going to be taking most everything over there to kind of get out of the Twitter chaos, if you will, and offer more direct resources and information and interaction with me. So hopefully we can build this community. I look forward to seeing everyone over there. Please let me know if you're from Don's show, when you show up and everything. That would be really fun too. And just God bless everyone. We can actually do something about this and end child trafficking in America, which is the hub for our world.
Well, God bless you too, Megan. Again, thank you, Megan Walsh. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I enjoy having you on so much, and you're doing great work. And everybody, go watch America's Most Corrupt. I love that title. So that's you'll get a big audience over there. Thanks again, Megan. Thanks everybody for joining us on our protest. We'll see you next week at the same time. Take care.